Welcome to this edition of the Head to Head Podcast. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 152 of the podcast. And in this edition of the podcast, I'm talking about Golden State point guard Steph Curry, who is arguably having his best season yet with the Warriors. Curry is 33 years old and is coming off of an injury that cost him most of last season. Yet this year, he is having his best offensive season yet. Curry is averaging over 31 points per game and shooting over 43% from free. And Curry has had 6 games this year where he's hit 10 or more free-pointers. Those are historic numbers from the game's best free-point shooter ever. It's a recent stretch of games that has caught everyone's attention. Over that period, Steph Curry averaged 30 or more points in 11 straight games, including 2 games where he scored 47 and 49 points respectively. And also during that 11-game stretch, Steph Curry hit 72 free-pointers. I say all this to say this. I think it is ridiculous that Steph Curry is not a front runner in the MVP conversation. Right now it seems to be all about Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid, but Steph Curry is having one of his best seasons ever. The Warriors are possibly going to make the postseason on his back. He is not playing with Kevin Durant. He is not playing with Klay Thompson. Draymond Green is a shell of himself, especially on offense. He is playing with the likes of Andrew Wiggins and Kelly Oubre, who are good players, but are not all-stars. I think there are a lot of factors as to why Steph Curry is not in that MVP conversation, and the biggest one is that he's already won 2 MVPs, and the NBA they simply love to give a guy who's never won an MVP before. After they've given you like 2 or 3 MVPs like LeBron, like Giannis, they're done with you. They seemingly don't want to recognize you again for MVP. It's the reason why Jordan didn't win the MVP every season. It's the reason why guys like Charles Barkley and Karl Malone have MVPs over Michael Jordan when Michael Jordan was clearly a better player. Steph Curry already has 2 MVPs, and that will be used against him. And the other reason I find to be ridiculous is that the Golden State Warriors aren't very good. Yes, I agree with that point. The Warriors are not very good, but why is the most valuable player have to be on one of the best teams in the NBA? How valuable can you be on a team that is already excellent? The value of Steph Curry to the Warriors is if he were not on it, they would probably be the worst team in the Western Conference. But right now, they are better than teams like the Sacramento Kings. They are better to me than the Memphis Grizzlies, and for me, that's because of Steph Curry. I understand why Jokic and Embiid are frontrunners. I'm not even telling you that Steph Curry should run away with the award. I'm telling you he should be more in the conversation. He is the reason they are good. Other sports reward guys who are not necessarily on great teams for MVPs. Mike Trout has won numerous MVPs in baseball. He is the best player. That word valuable has really hurt this award to me. Steph Curry right now is playing like Russell Wilson with the Seahawks. Like Russell Wilson is the reason the Seahawks are worth watching. Without him, they are not a very good football team. And the same for Steph Curry and the Warriors. If the Warriors didn't have Steph Curry, they would be awful. You have to take that into account that we are watching the Warriors to watch Steph Curry. That's his value. He brings attention. That should be a part of it. That's his value to the team. They would be absolutely worthless right now without Steph Curry on the roster. It would just be Kelly Oubre, Andrew Wiggins, and Draymond Green. Steph Curry is the reason people are paying attention to the Golden State Warriors. It's the reason why the Warriors are in the playoff hunt. He should be the MVP frontrunner right now. I 100% believe he should be MVP. And another thing about Steph Curry that I find really annoying are the people that doubt him as one of the best players of this generation. I feel it's because he's a point guard. We are obsessed with these forwards like Kawhi Leonard, like LeBron James, that we forget about Steph Curry in an era where we are seeing some of the best point guard play ever by guys like Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook. Guess who is head and shoulders above both of those guys? Steph Curry. He is the best point guard of his generation, and it's not even close, and yet this era is dominated by great point guards. He is one of the best players in NBA history. I understand there are people people that don't like Steph Curry, that think he's ruined the game by creating the 3-point shot. Who cares? He is one of the best players ever, and he should probably get more than 2 MVPs throughout his career. I also find it really interesting when people make the argument that LeBron should win the MVP because he's 38 years old and he's having one of his best seasons. I get that argument, but nobody makes that argument for Steph Curry. He is a 33-year-old point guard who is shooting the lights out and carrying the Golden State Warriors. Remember when there were some people during the offseason who thought the Warriors were going to be putrid? Well, they are far from that. They are entertaining watch, and Steph Curry is the reason why. He is having an historic 3-point shooting season, and he's the most entertaining player in the league, and that means a lot to me, because guess what basketball is? It's entertainment. Yes, Jokic is nice. Yes, Joel Embiid is nice. Steph Curry is the most entertaining player in basketball. How about this for a stat to track Steph Curry's value? When Steph Curry is on the court, the Warriors have the 8th best offense in the NBA. When he's off the court, they are dead last in offense. That's how special this guy is playing. They are insanely good offensively when he is on the court. He can shoot the ball from anywhere. When he's off the court, they are the worst offense in the NBA. That is a stat to back up the fact that he is valuable. I understand the difference between valuable and best player, but I want to give the award to the best player in basketball. And I think from beginning to end, the best player in basketball will end up being Steph Curry. I also think it's possible that Steph Curry is going through Warriors fatigue, like they dominated the sport of basketball, so now we as a culture are saying it's time for someone else's run. And I understand that, but don't disregard what this man is doing on the basketball court. He is shooting at historical rates. He's the best shooter by far. He's better than Ray Allen. He's better than all those names. He's better than Larry Bird. I mean, he dominated the 3-point contest. This is the year of Steph Curry, and I feel like most people are letting that slip. I get it. We as a society are watching it and enjoying it, but I think it should be remembered as an MVP season for Steph Curry because the Warriors don't have very much on their roster. Andrew Wiggins is having a nice season. Kelly Oubre is having some moments, but he's been pretty inconsistent. And I don't really understand what's happened to Draymond Green. I really don't understand the whole Draymond Green thing. He was a decent 3-point shooter. Now he is awful offensively. He's a pretty good passer, but he is basically bringing nothing to the offensive side of basketball. I know he's a defensive player of the year. I don't know if he's doing this on purpose. I think it's maddening to watch Draymond Green play offense right now. So I do find it pretty fascinating that Steph Curry has become a one-man show on a team that also has Draymond Green. I don't understand why when Klay Thompson went down, Draymond Green can't up his numbers to like 15 points per game. Has Draymond become that bad of an offensive player? Getting back to this idea that the NBA won't give an MVP to a guy on a bad team, remember, they didn't give it to Kobe when he was carrying them into the postseason with a roster that had Kwame Brown on it and Smush Parker. That year, Kobe averaged over 35 points per game. And I think one of the most ridiculous things about Kobe's career is that he only has one MVP. And the reason they gave it to him is because he was on the best team in basketball that had Pau Gasol, Andrew Bynum. I mean, that team was loaded. Lamar Odom was on that team. They gave Kobe the MVP when he was on a fantastic team, and they didn't reward him for possibly his best season. I think that was the year where he scored 81 points per game. Remember, they didn't give the guy the MVP the year he had 60 in a game and he had 81 in a game. This idea that you don't give the MVP because the guy's not on a title contending team is utterly ridiculous. Another example of this is Dwayne Wade. I think it was the year before the Big Three happened. He led them to the postseason with Michael Beasley, Jermaine O'Neal was on the roster as well I believe. Dwayne Wade carried the team. He led the NBA in scoring with over 30 points per game, and he didn't win MVP. That was the year Dwayne Wade should have won an MVP, and I think it's ridiculous that Dwayne Wade never won an MVP. I mean, come on. What is the whole point? You can only be an MVP if you're on like a top 4 seeded team? That's ridiculous. The value of Steph Curry is that the Warriors would be utterly awful without him. The Lakers would have been awful without Kobe on that roster, and the Heat would have been pathetic without Dwayne Wade on that team. Those guys should have won MVPs for those years, and Curry should win an MVP for this season. Also, what is it about point guards winning MVPs that we get so annoyed with? Remember when Steve Nash won the 2 MVPs and we were like, oh, those should be Shaq's awards. Shaq is even mad about it. Steve Nash is one of the best players in NBA history. Why are we acting like he's not worthy of MVPs? And we do that with Steph Curry's MVPs too. Oh, James Harden should have won that MVP. Like, what is the point of that? I don't understand the anti-point guard MVP discussion. I mean, why is Dame Lillard not even in the conversation? What would the Portland Trailblazers be without Dame Lillard? I'll even admit I was a little mad at Russell Westbrook winning an MVP, but not because he was a point guard, because he was chasing triple doubles. That's what got him the MVP. I find that to be ridiculous. But the idea that a point guard, every time he wins an MVP, we're like, oh, it should have been somebody else, is totally stupid. I don't understand why we look back at those guys and say, oh, they shouldn't have won that MVP. We don't do that with Allen Iverson. We all say, yes, he should have won the MVP. But with Curry and Nash, we're like, oh, those guys are not worthy of their MVPs. How we look at the MVP award is crazy. We should be looking at guys who are lifting their team from being bad to being okay. Look at Luka Doncic. He should be in the MVP conversation. What are the Mavericks without Luka? Porzingis has been hurt, yet Luka has them in the postseason. Here's another guy that should be in the MVP conversation who's never won an MVP. Chris Paul. What were the Phoenix Suns before they had Chris Paul? Yes, you can say they had a nice run on the bubble, but I guarantee you they would not be the number 2 seed in the West without Chris Paul right now. Donovan Mitchell, before he went down, should have been in the MVP chase. I mean, why are we deciding this over 2 people? That's another thing that I find to be ridiculous about this conversation. We always make it about 2 people and 2 people only. I mean, the last 2 years have been all about Giannis Antetokounmpo, and rightfully so, but now that he has his 2 MVPs, we're done with him. I mean, he has not had a very good season. I've watched some games where he has looked utterly useless on the Milwaukee Bucks. I don't think he should be in the MVP chase, but why isn't a guy like Kawhi Leonard ever in the MVP conversation? The way we look at MVPs is stupid, and Steph Curry should be in that conversation along with a lot of other names. But this year, we've decided that Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic are the 2 guys that should be in the MVP chase because it's an interesting plot. They're 2 big men. They're both really skilled. Nikola Jokic is the best passing big man in the league, and Joel Embiid is the best scoring big man in the league. So let's put these guys up against each other and ignore everyone else. Does that not sound insane to anyone else but me? We're ignoring the stats of Steph Curry. We're ignoring the stats of Dame Lillard. We're ignoring so many other players. Here's another guy that should be in the MVP conversation. What Julius Randle is doing with the Knicks is phenomenal. What would the Knicks be right now without Julius Randle? He is helping turning around that culture and turning them into a consistent franchise. Those are the type of guys I think should be MVP candidates because I can actually judge their value. Yes, I know Joel Embiid is super valuable to the Sixers and they couldn't win an NBA Finals without him. But guess what? So is Steph Curry to the Warriors. I think Steph Curry is more valuable to the Warriors than Joel Embiid is to the Sixers. If Steph Curry went down, the Warriors could lose 10 in a row. The Sixers still have Ben Simmons. The Sixers still have Tobias Harris. The Sixers still have Seth Curry. The Warriors, led by Andrew Wiggins and Kelly Oubre, would be a very bad basketball team. That's how we should look at value. If you want to turn it into the best player award, then do so because that's what you're doing. But you've called it the most valuable player. And to me, Steph Curry is the most valuable player in basketball right now. he's proving it. You can't use that argument anymore that he's playing with too much talent so that he can't win MVPs. Now, there's barely any talent around him, and he's having his best season yet. So I think you need to reward that, or you look like hypocrites. Remember that stretch when Curry and Durant were teammates and they were both averaging over 26 points per game, but none of them could win MVPs because they were playing together. Well, guess what? Steph Curry's not playing with Kevin Durant anymore. There's no more excuses for him to not even be in the MVP hunt, and right now it seems like he's not even in that, despite the fact that he's having his best offensive season of his historical career. There's a couple of things I've been thinking about when watching Steph Curry recently. The first thing is, I definitely want the Warriors to make the postseason because I want to see Steph Curry on the biggest stage. I think it's possible he could get out of the first round. That's how good I think he is as a player right now. He is on a streak. I wouldn't want to see Steph Curry in the playoffs if I were his opponent. The other thing is, I can't wait for the future of the Golden State Warriors. I think they are a fascinating basketball team. Steph Curry is going to be 34 years old next year, but he's going to get Klay Thompson back. It's going to be interesting to see what this core looks like around them. Are they going to keep Andrew Wiggins long term? Is Kelly Oubre, who's a free agent, going to remain with the Warriors? There are some big question marks when it comes to the Warriors, but you have to be excited at least about their short-term future. The real question is, what is their long-term future? I mean, James Wiseman, who was their first-round draft pick, he was having an okay season, then he got hurt. Is he the future star of the Warriors? Are the Warriors ever going to be able to contend for an NBA championship again with Steph Curry on the roster? I hope so, and I think you should all hope for that too, because when this guy is on the biggest stage, he delivers. He is the most entertaining player in basketball. He has revolutionized the game of basketball. He's made the three-point shot more popular than ever, for good and for bad. He is the best point guard of his generation, which includes Russell Westbrook, Dame Lillard, Chris Paul. He is better than all three of those players. Recognize the talent that is Steph Curry and don't take it for granted, because he doesn't have much more of these seasons left. I mean, I don't see Steph Curry shooting like this when he's 37 years old, but if there is anyone who could pull that off, I would definitely put my money on Steph Curry. He's a one-of-a-kind generational talent, and I just wish we gave him the recognition he deserves. And I know that sounds stupid. He's won finals, he's won MVPs, we all know who he is, but in this season, he is putting up his best numbers, and I think that needs to be recognized. Enough of this, you have to be on a title contending team to win the most valuable player award. That doesn't make sense to me. The other sports don't abide by that, and I don't think the NBA should either. James Harden was ahead of Curry in the MVP chase before he got hurt. How ridiculous is that James Harden was on a team that he was traded for that included Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, yet somehow he was further ahead in the MVP chase because he was putting up these insane triple-double numbers. But Steph Curry was on a team that had Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson, but could never be in the MVP chase. See how hypocritical these so-called MVP rankings really are. I feel like we tried to decide who the MVP is based on the fact if they are on a good team or what we deem a bad team. But what I think we fail to realize is the Warriors would be utterly useless without Steph Curry. They are entertaining. People are paying attention to them and to him. And for that, he should at least be in the conversation and, in my opinion, win the award. I'm sure Curry himself doesn't even care if he wins a third MVP or not. He's already been there and done that. But in a year where he is shooting the lights out, at least have him in the conversation. People are paying attention to the Golden State Warriors without Kevin Durant and without Klay Thompson. And a lot of people said the Warriors were going to be the worst team in the NBA, and they are far from that, and that is because of Stephen Curry, the best shooter in the history of basketball. Whenever he shoots the lights out in a season, he should be ahead in the MVP chase. That's all I'm saying. Pay attention to Steph Curry in this season, because it's one to remember. It's his best offensive season, and and he's 33 years old coming off of an injury. Steph Curry is the best point guard of his generation, and he deserves to be at least in the conversation for MVP. And next year, I hope he continues this streak with Klay Thompson by his side. When those two are shooting the lights out together, it is the most entertaining thing in all of basketball. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Head Dad Podcast. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. So please rate, review, and subscribe.